Hello again, Dark Knight. I see you've managed to find the Warden's plans, all tucked away nice and cozy. But that was only the beginning. There lies so much more within this city. Crimes, gang wars, and secrets wait for you. I look forward to seeing where this story goes.
Well, it's about time I put this suit back on.
2 years ago, I reviewed a game called Batman Arkham Asylum for this channel. I enjoyed playing it for the first time in early 2012, and I enjoyed playing it in 2022 for the review. I was happy to see how many 3D Metroidvania factors it adapted, worked to flesh out the exploration, the presentation really adapted the comic mythos and made its own thing out of it really well, and it felt like a project that was made by people who love Batman and wanted to give him something genuinely great in game format, going against the usual of licensed games at the time. It was a monster hit back in the day, so I think you can guess that a sequel was in order. However, even before Arkham Asylum released, if the Easter egg I left a cliffhanger on was of any sign, Rocksteady did have some ideas for a sequel during Arkham Asylum's development, apparently even coming up with a story idea early on. And it just so happens that things were in their favor, as after the success that they saw, Arkham City would receive a bigger budget for both development and marketing, and Rocksteady wanted to use that to not just try and go further with putting the player more into Batman's shoes, or boots rather, but they wanted to go a lot bigger with the world now that we're off Arkham Island and onto the streets of Gotham. The end result came in the form of Batman Arkham City, released in October of 2011. And to say people fell in love with this game is an understatement. The buzz around this game was absolutely nuts, and at this point, I think the point that Rocksteady genuinely cared about Batman and Asylum wasn't just a one and done was pretty clear. In fact, because it tried this hard to make something special out of a licensed property, and this was the dawn of open world games slowly becoming more popular among AAA studios, I think we could say that the design ideas of a lot of open world games, and especially superhero games, can be traced back to Arkham City in some form. As these years have gone on, I believe it's become easier to say that this game is in many ways a trailblazer for what we would eventually get in years to come. I would not get around to getting this game until 2015, where I would buy the base version of the game to add to my PS3 collection.
Which was a very bad idea considering the Game of the Year edition was already out at this point.
This release contains all the added DLC, including campaign segments where you get to play as Catwoman, so if you made the mistake of getting the original 360 or PS3 release like I did, you'll need to pay a little more for the extra content. Sorry 360 fans. I only remedied this in recent years by buying it again on Steam, which is the version I'll be looking at for this review, as I feel it looks and runs the best, and it goes for really cheap all the time. Though just get this out there, any easily available version of the game does have all the DLC included, all a matter of what console you want it on. So then, what's my take on a 13-year-old game that many people still treasure? Well, let's have a look. It's been about a year and a half since the events of Arkham Asylum, where Batman was able to stop the threat of the Titan formula and take Joker down. But credit for the victory has primarily gone to the warden of the asylum, Quincy Sharp, who has gained enough favor to become mayor of Gotham City. With his new wealth, he shut down both Arkham Asylum and Blackgate Penitentiary, and has designated a small part of Gotham right next to Arkham Asylum to maintaining all the prisoners held within, which is now called Arkham City. But as it turns out, this twisted narrative was carried out thanks to the one Mayor Sharp has been reporting to, Dr. Hugo Strange, a psychiatrist who wasted no time in taking over the city and letting every inmate run around within. The general public, including Bruce Wayne, begin to have doubts over this and voice their opposition, which leads to Bruce getting captured by Strange's forces and being imprisoned himself. And there's a reason why Strange has chosen to let the criminals do whatever within the city lines, as he plans to unleash something called Protocol 10 later on that night. So naturally, the investigation begins to find out what that is and stop potential fatalities. But there's one problem with that. Strange here is aware that Bruce is Batman, and he's willing to let that snippet of information out should he step out of line.
And for those not aware, a superhero's number one biggest danger is for their identity to become public knowledge. I'm sure Spider-Man can vouch for that.
So Bruce steps out of line and suits up ready to investigate. His search leads him to rescue Catwoman, who was also managing to do what she does best in there, stealing valuable items before she got dragged into a gang war as a hostage by Two-Face. And after assassination attempts by the Joker, Batman eventually confronts him in the Siona Steel Mill, where he learns that the Titan Joker injected himself with in the last game is mutating his blood and slowly killing him. But Mr. J here has not only sent out samples of that contaminated blood into Gotham, but has also transfused one such sample into Batman, meaning he's infected with the same fatal disease. So with this in mind, Batman's not only got to learn about Protocol 10, but also search Arkham City for necessary tools to create a cure, which involves a sample of blood from Ra's al Ghul and other tools from Mr. Freeze, who is currently being held hostage by the Penguin. So right off the bat, there's a good amount I enjoy about the story. Having Batman's identity as a stake is a really good way to make Hugo Strange seem more threatening. It's not every day where you see superhero stories fully test a hero's ability to keep their identity a secret from literally everyone, and I like that they actually go this direction. The setting is also a good reason for most of Batman's hero gallery to be here, despite the fact that some clearly got more attention to others. I already mentioned Joker, I'm cool with Penguin being a major antagonist for the first third of the game, and I have no arguments with villains like Bane, Riddler, Zsasz, and Poison Ivy being subsidiaries. But it is unfortunate that Two-Face gets sidelined after rescuing Catwoman, only coming back in a brief epilogue mission for her after the credits have already rolled. But the balance is still pretty good, and the characterization is on point. I especially like what they did with Mr. Freeze. And looking over all this in more detail, I do like how it handles a few of the mysteries at play. Protocol 10 being a plan to kill every inmate in Arkham City to achieve complete power over Gotham is a pretty good plan, and it explains why they're allowed to run amok to begin with. And throughout the game, Joker's had Clayface going around posing as him to manipulate Batman into finding him the cure, and motivate his henchmen not long after said cure is stolen, while giving them weapons from Strange's stock. Despite Clayface never being properly introduced until the final battle of the main story, the foreshadowing is pretty clever, with the clues of there always being two of something Joker's involved in when Batman is investigating, and when you consider that Joker both hid the twist and stuck it right out in the open at the same time. Before, I thought Clayface's inclusion was kinda pointless, but looking back, this was one of the better ways this type of mystery could be pulled off, and I give credit where it's due. But that begs the question, how do the stories of Protocol 10 and Joker looking for a cure tie into one another? And I'm sorry to say, they kind of don't. Unfortunately, when the Joker part of the game gets introduced, everything involving Protocol 10 takes a back seat. I know that now Batman is going to die if he doesn't find a cure. Heck, he was literally mere moments away from doing so before delaying it thanks to the League of Assassins. But for the entire reason why Arkham City was built to begin with, it's so weird that it only becomes a side thing once Joker enters. It doesn't help that there are moments of the game where we actually do continue with the Protocol 10 plot, with moments like actually confronting Quincy Sharp, and some moments where Batman thinks Joker's plans in Protocol 10 are connected, if not one and the same. But they are not. Joker doesn't even know what Protocol 10 is, so that's out of the window. I feel like Strange's plot is at odds with Joker's, as most of what you do in the campaign is for the cure. It gets super distracting when the game randomly switches focuses, and Protocol 10 honestly loses its presence since it isn't given enough attention. Neither is Strange himself for that matter. After a good bit of the game has passed, it's made clear that he is aware that Batman is out trying to stop the commotion, but he doesn't do anything about it. Doctor, you know who Batman is. You know he's trying to stop you. Spill the beans! There's plenty of criminals could do with that information. Aside from him counting down when Protocol 10 will launch, Strange becomes almost a complete non-entity until the final quarter of the campaign, and it sadly damages having Batman's identity at stake. And I would say this is disappointing because of his plan, but then his credibility is damaged even further when it's revealed that Ra's al Ghul was really pulling the strings, who before we only saw back in Wonder City next to a Lazarus pit. That twist I didn't think we needed, because the setup for Strange was already as strong as it was. And sadly, one of the biggest characters I think should have more to do is Catwoman. Aside from rescuing Batman as Protocol 10 is starting, her activity barely helps the narrative. She's even put out of commission right as the Joker plot gets going, and doesn't rejoin the fray until the launch of Protocol 10, which is near the end of the game. That's really disappointing, because if they went out of their way to do so much for her in gameplay, why is she an afterthought in story?
And why was she DLC in the original release to begin with?
I'm really annoyed by how a lot of this is not given satisfactory storytelling, because not only are there moments I do like, the ending in particular is fantastic, but I really like a lot of these ideas. I like this place being part of a big plan to seize control. I like the direction the Joker plot goes in to follow up on the last game, and I like the idea of the game being set in a big city infested by crimes and gang wars. but it feels like they wanted to do so much that so little has time to really sink in, and everything's fighting with one another. As a result, I got confused with what the bigger picture is supposed to be, and then stopped caring about what was going on, only waking back up at a moment when the campaign was ending. And that said, after the last game had a much more concise story that committed to the reason why I should care. I don't think the story is necessarily badly written, nothing feels manipulative for what it's trying to go for, and it does feel like there's genuine structure and escalation to it all. I'd also say it's disingenuous to say it just evolves into your standard Batman vs. Joker plot, but I feel like both these story ideas could have been so much better than they are, let alone more organically connected. Looking at Arkham City presentation-wise, it has a lot in common with Asylum. Designs of returning characters haven't seen that much change since, with select few like Bane practically looking identical. The idea behind the general atmosphere being gothic and mysterious is similar, and some things like the mid-gameplay dialogue exchanges, and moments where Batman thinks to himself without moving his mouth are still here.
Catwoman does this too, but it's all okay because the game does step up its graphics while maintaining its fantastic art direction.
Visually, I think Arkham City as a location looks better than the Asylum. It feels like it not only has a bigger scope, but when venturing into the streets, it also feels just the right amount of cramped that can make the player think to themselves, I should not be here. This city feels like the underworld froze over, and it's every person for themselves, meaning you could die at any moment from a simple crime or a flat-out gang war. There's tons of great locations in this place that I really want to know more about. Standouts for me go to the museum and the mess Penguin has made out of it, and especially Wonder City, because who used to live here? What's the deal with these robots? What happened that caused some houses to be broken like this? It's really creepy, but also fascinating. It helps that on the PC version, the game runs perfectly at 60 frames per second, with little to no hiccups or slowdowns, and the load times don't take up too much time. Love how this game was optimized so that it can easily run like this on so many computers, even older ones. Character models are much better than they were in Asylum, as I believe Rocksteady used the bigger budget they had to improve what they did last time. The normal NPCs now don't look more clay-like than the actual clay monster, and I am more than happy to acknowledge that. Speaking of which, I'm also happy they continue to make more awesome designs for Batman villains that weren't here last time, with easy standouts going to Clayface because that is a total unit, and that is an ugly face to go with it. Penguin because he looks stylish with that Cruella de Vil jacket, then again I like it when villains pull off that kind of look, and Mr. Freeze because him having a steel hazmat suit makes him look really creepy. Even if I have very mixed thoughts on the story, the voice acting salvages as much of it as it can, and it's one of my favorite things about the game, just in general. Everyone feels like they were giving it their all, and some deliveries are just about as perfect as you could ask. If you ask me, this game is a huge highlight for both Kevin Conroy as Batman and Mark Hamill as Joker. With Conroy, even if my opinions on his lines by themselves vary, when they come out of his mouth, I don't just get how serious he's being, I feel how serious he's being. I am so sad we lost him, because he is a treasure as Batman everywhere he shows up, and this is one of my go-to examples. As for Hamill as Joker, he's able to really voice this character in a way where he sounds like he's genuinely sick, and I can't imagine that being easy for a voice as outlandish as Joker's. But he sounds like he's having a ball, as he always does, so I always have a ball whenever he's on screen. Corey Burton as Hugo Strange is also great, really giving him a presence, though the Star Wars fan in me could not unhear Count Dooku when listening to him. And continuing my Star Wars love, I was surprised to see them get D. Bradley Baker to voice Ra's al Ghul, and he does a great job with him as well. Nolan North was great as the Penguin, and as an extra voice for the Grunts. Grey DeLisle slipped into Catwoman's shoes quite nicely, and I admittedly was surprised when I began to notice that Maurice LaMarche was voicing Mr. Freeze. Heck, in his case, I really like how it seems like they found a good middle ground between bringing his own impression to the character and emulating the feeling given by his voice actor from the animated series, the late Michael Ansara. That may be just me having the animated series on my mind, but it's pretty cool how many comparisons you could draw without breaking the suspension of disbelief. This game's got a really good taste for who to cast in these roles. Admittedly, most of the other things I can say about how this game sounds would be repeats of what I said in my Arkham Asylum video. Despite not listening to the soundtrack much on its own, I think it's more enjoyable in gameplay, retaining the tension of when you're taking on a bunch of mooks, and the atmosphere of when you're doing detective work or exploring the city. They also kept the crunchy sound effects of combat, which I am very happy for. They go a long way in making it more satisfying, and I will gladly give you another montage of it.
I will never turn down the chance to add that kind of therapy to my videos.
There's barely any glaring negatives I can find with this game's presentation. It holds up remarkably well for a game released late in the 7th generation's lifespan, with its fantastic art direction and all the other factors surrounding it. Even with general graphics on newer hardware progressing, I think it's still hard to say this game doesn't look good anymore, nor say Rocksteady was just phoning it in because Asylum was a surprise hit. It definitely improves upon what was established, while still maintaining what worked before, and sometimes, that's all a sequel's presentation needs to do. The previous statement I made about improving what might have needed some improvement, and keeping what worked, definitely applies in gameplay. Batman controls basically the same as he did last time. Comfortable running speed, comfortable glide, useful grappling hook, and all that. But while the grappling hook is the same starting off, not long into the campaign, you can complete a small chain of side quests to immediately upgrade it so you can catapult yourself once you grapple to a specific point. This is very fun to do, but also very essential to speed up traveling around Arkham City because of how large it is compared to Arkham Asylum, especially when considering side quests where it can really help you. I wouldn't say that Arkham City is as big compared to other maps and other games we'd eventually see, but this is where the size and general design leans less into that of a 3D Metroidvania, and more into an open world title. The streets of the city are far less linear than in Asylum, and you are given a lot of choices for what you want to do at given intervals. Two things I will compliment about this immediately are that firstly, Batman has batarangs, remote control batarangs, the explosive gel, the Batclaw, and the cryptographic sequencer already equipped from the start, so there's already so much of the city you can explore without it being overwhelming. And all that leads me to secondly, despite all this, the game is still finding new ways to gradually feed you more content as you are going along. New side quests will pop up from time to time, especially if you know where to look, and there are some areas you can explore and new goodies you can get once you get more gadgets, with my personal favorites being the Disruptor, which you can upgrade to temporarily disable enemy firearms, which is a lifesaver, the Smoke Pellet because being able to throw it can give you the chance to take down a lot of enemies at once, which I think is perfect for stealth sections, and the Freeze Blast because of how useful it is for traversal and combat. I especially got more use out of them in combat because Batman has some new moves he can do with the combination of them, like slamming Gruncy dragged with the Batclaw into the ground, and more importantly, some of these have quick commands now, so you can use these to keep the combos going and keep yourself safe. I recommend you do this against hordes of grunts carrying stun batons and riot shields. Aside from this, combat's about the same as it was before mechanically. You have one attack button, but the challenge comes from the best way to string combos together, which isn't as easy to do compared to other games with the combat systems that I have played, figuring out the best way to deal with certain mobs, and timing your counters. However, the new quick gadget use system is very handy. Batman's able to counter up to 2 grunts at once, and by gaining skill points, he can gain skills that can either stun mobs in his vicinity, or just instantly take out a grunt if you're choosing. While I don't really like it when the game throws in so many enemy types at once, and countering sword wielders can be very finicky, since it all relates to the direction of the camera, I enjoy combat sequences more this time. The extra moves are really fun to use, and if you know what you're doing, you can take out hordes very quickly. I really like thinking ahead on what gadget I want to use to make encounters easier, and looking to see which one is a bigger threat. All this also applies to stealth sections too, which are still one of my favorite parts about this game. It is very satisfying to get the jump on enemies awake from the pack, and watch as they scramble as I take care of the rest, but they still feel fresh because 1, they don't fall for gargoyle strats as much last time. You can still use those to assess the situation and shake the enemies if you get caught, but they will get the idea to destroy them if they know you are using them, and some enemies have heat-seeking goggles to look above for them. Some even have devices that jam detective mode, so they know how useful it is for those sections. 2, the rooms will encourage you to use your gadgets more to make jobs easier and stay out of sight. The Smoke Pellet is a godsend for blinding enemies and escaping. Mowers on the open can shock them when they're close and cause them to lose their gun temporarily. You can shoot them with the electric gun to get them to briefly discharge their weapon, and the Disruptor is handy for temporarily handicapping them while you handle anything else. There's a lot more you could do in stealth sections, and they still manage to be enthralling no matter the setting. And not only do both these show the increased versatility of the gadgets, the bosses are entirely built around them. I don't think these are anything amazing, as aside from maybe Solomon Grundy, the uses of each gadget are pretty straightforward. But compared to what we had in Asylum, this is a massive glow up. These have a lot more presence, and require way more than the Titan monsters did, and in Raish's case, provide a much more pleasing spectacle. Although there is one boss in the game that I do think is amazing, sublime even. And anyone who has played the game knows who I'm talking about. Rather than testing one particular gadget, the battle with Mr. Freeze tests you with stealth skills instead. He's completely invulnerable to frontal assaults, so it all comes down to your kit and the arena itself to damage him. However, once you use a particular method, you cannot use it again. He adapts to your strategy by freezing things that previously helped you, meaning you constantly have to change your own to stay ahead. It's a battle that requires you to think outside the box to get the jump on Freeze, and rewards your intuition and timing. It's such a well-crafted fight. All of this, and the ways you traverse through Arkham City, make for a genuinely good main campaign, despite my feelings on the story. But it's clear that you would be missing out on a lot of the game by only sticking to it. The side quests have a giant degree of prominence here. Last time they were pretty light except for the Riddler, but now a lot of villains have set up their own within Arkham City, so needless to say, there is a lot more to do here. I think the idea of some of them was to give you an extra task alongside the main campaign, like helping Bane search for giant Titan containers scattered all over the city, which sadly ends with him betraying you and being defeated by a metal gate that I think he could easily rip apart, and hunting for serial killer Victor Zsasz, since the phone calls you need to trace him can arrive at any time. But even if the detective side of Batman is pretty downplayed in the main campaign, some of these side quests do pick up the slack. There's some cases involving Hush and Deadshot going around killing people, and they involve you investigating crime scenes and every once in a while, interrogating someone in order to find them, and apprehend Deadshot anticlimactically. Hush's defeat comes later. Some of these also serve as decent follow-ups to characters in the campaign, like helping Mr. Freeze find his wife and get some stolen tech back, and helping out some previously imprisoned police officers hide in a place you previously defeated Penguin in. And then you get to the Riddler. Yep, he's back, and he scattered loads of riddles and collectibles all around the map, and it's up to you to find them all. And by loads, I mean loads. Riddler trophies are all over the place in this map, and each area has at least 5 to 6 riddles to scan for, sometimes even more. And this is sadly where the Riddler has become a lot more contentious in this series, for a reason that I honestly agree with. This is just too much to collect. I think the devs really wanted to show off how much bigger Arkham City is as a game, and try to expand upon what the Riddler had last time, but in doing so, in trying to complete it all, I think this quest takes up way too much time just using gadgets at their most basic level a bunch of times for trophies that feel like an obligation. To put it this way, being the main campaign on its own just takes roughly 9 to 10 hours, give or take another hour. But since I did most of the side quests and roughly a third to half of Riddler's quest, I bumped that up to roughly 14 hours. By the time I was done with the Riddler and small bits of other quests I miss, I collected a little over 25 hours of total playtime. Granted, some of that is just from those needle in a haystack moments, which are just inevitable with these fetch quests, but with how often I was marking normal trophies and doing very small tasks to find them, and how much time it ultimately added, I do think this would be much better if the more menial collectibles were shaved off. It does not help that their general location can only be uncovered not by getting a map like last time, since those are gone, but either by scanning them when you see them, or by interrogating thugs glowing green, which requires you to defeat all the other thugs in the vicinity first, which can be much harder without taking potshots than it sounds. With all that said though, I didn't feel unsatisfied with this quest. There are loads of Riddler trophies hidden behind some really creative methods, like I especially enjoyed the gliding puzzles, and when they required you to use gadgets in obtuse ways, as well as scanning background elements referencing certain characters, because those riddles made a good balance between vague and obvious. The rewards you get for these are also well worth the effort. There's backstory logs that tell you about the history of certain characters, and character tapes if you go strange talking to certain villains for you to see. And you can unlock maps for Challenge Mode, which is now called Riddler's Revenge, and unlock 3D models of the cast and concept art via this quest. Why does Clayface's load in right as you open it? But the biggest reward is the trap rooms you get to go to. At certain intervals, Riddler will give you the location of a hostage he has kidnapped, and you have to navigate a nasty death trap to rescue them. These are really fun platforming challenges that really use your gadgets and reflexes in fun and creative ways. And after all the combat, this is a nice change of pace. So I was happy to get them all, but I think they could have cut back in a few places, and I can see why someone wouldn't enjoy this, let alone complete it. Especially since this is, unfortunately, where the lack of a fast travel function really hurts the pacing of these, and the other side quests, and there are some trophies that only Catwoman can pick up. So yeah, as you might have put together based on a few comments, Catwoman is playable in this game. There are some snippets of the main campaign where you get to play as her, but after the one with Two-Face, when there's only side missions remaining, you can freely switch between her and Batman at any time. As for Catwoman herself, she's pretty good. She can't glide like Batman, but her whip does allow her to continually jump to areas you want to go to, and while she doesn't get anywhere near the amount of gadgets Batman does, all three of them are still handy for combat and stealth. I mostly prefer playing as Batman because of how much more there is to do with him. Catwoman doesn't exactly have the most amount of health, even when fully upgraded, and her ground takedown takes way too long, like in this case where this dog got the chance to do his best Officer Earl impression. But I do enjoy having Catwoman around. I will never say no to more playable characters. In fact, while these two are the only ones playable in the story, Robin's playable in both Riddler's Revenge and their Harley Quinn's Revenge campaign, which was initially DLC. I don't have much to say about the latter, because all that happens is just the standard adventure of Batman and Robin stopping Harley, but it's still pretty fun for giving us more of the game that I enjoyed. But Robin as a character is a ton of fun too. He's not that far off from Batman, as he can glide, use a grapple to get up to high ledges, and share some of his gadgets with Batman, but one of them is the smoke pellet, which, yes, and he uses his backlaw to zip towards other enemies rather than drag them towards him. I had a lot of fun messing around with this, especially when getting surprise strikes. Kinda felt like Spider-Man at points. But Riddler's Revenge is also the only place where you can play as a fourth character, Nightwing. It's unfortunate that he has no presence in this game, nor any proper voice lines, but on the bright side, he's pretty dang awesome. His combos are so much fun to string together. He has finishers that can stun even shield and armor enemies, making it easier to clean house. He's got the backlaw for potential slam combos like Batman, as well as the line launcher and disruptor, which are great in stealth sections, especially since he can't glide. And his other gadgets are great too, namely the wrist dart. You only have 3 per challenge, and the aiming controls are really loose, if only because the reticle never stays put, but a headshot with these is an instant takedown, so if it was always still, these would be too overpowered. Whether you want to take care of a particular enemy early, or just clean up what's there, use these and watch as they drop like flies. It's kind of liberating. But yeah, all that's left is Riddler's Revenge, and it works identically in a challenge mode from last time. It's a series of combat and stealth challenges that reward you with medals based on your score in the former's case, and your completed objectives in the latter. So if you want more of either sequence, this mode's got you covered. Like Asylum, I got a ton out of this mode, exploring what each character could do in combat and in stealth, with the latter continuing to show you what unusual things you can do in them. And if you've got access to the download maps, there's even a slightly increased variety of scenarios, like pulling Black Mask until he finally decides to go down on a train, seriously this took a hot minute, or enduring waves of enemies in the Iceberg Lounge until you drop. Likewise with Catwoman and Harley Quinn's Revenge, these were DLC for the original release, and every one from the Game of the Year edition onwards has these already included. You could also play these with custom modifiers, some helpful like having more health, being able to punch through shields and armor, and having batarangs be instant takedowns, and others hinder you like having less health, enemies becoming more aggressive, and enemies having easier access to weapons lying around. There's also small campaigns with these, where you do a series of back-to-back challenges, with one-use modifiers that become permanently disabled for that run if you beat one of the challenges with it, with some of them forcing the negative ones onto you. And you have a limited number of retries to keep going, with both deaths and forced resets counting it down. I really like how the modifiers are implemented, because they make each run customizable, and in the campaign's case, there's strategy in terms of thinking about what's coming, and adapting to it, especially if you are pursuing the Riddler medals. With all this customization, this mode has loads of replay value. Each character playing differently with movesets and gadget loadouts can lead to different experiences with each map, since those are shared, and the Riddler medals being different for everyone means the game definitely accounts for those. It isn't easy to get all the medals, in fact the stealth ones will end up announcing your position a lot of the time, but it's still fun to think of approaches for everyone. I do have a few issues with the gameplay overall, like the Riddler trophies were a bit much, some other side quests feel a bit underdeveloped, and every once in a while there is a Riddler medal asking for too much. But not only does the game shine in the replayability aspect, but I was not bored throughout any of my playthrough. I wanted to explore what there was more, and I say the game has done something right if I'm saying that. I may not hail the game as a true timeless modern classic, as I had a couple small snags in the gameplay, and I didn't like the story overall despite the good it had going for it, but I can see why many others do. I always had a great time thinking my way through combat encounters, using gadgets to explore Arkham City or thinking my way through stealth sequences, or just doing side quests to apprehend various criminals, that I could not stay mad at what I didn't like. There were a lot of very smart and admirable design decisions made with this game, and I don't think we'd have much of the quality of some highly acclaimed open world titles or acclaimed superhero games if this game was not here to pave way for those ideas. In that sense, I owe Arkham City a lot of thanks for the direction it went in, and I still say it's worth playing to this day. I highly recommend you give this game a shot, even if you're not a fan of Batman. It's not overly alienating to newcomers, though I think it's worth playing Asylum first to appreciate the updates and changes more, and I'm sure even the most surface-level Batman fan will at least find something to appreciate. The PC version is still my most recommended version, for the silky smooth performance and how it goes on sale all the time, but aside from the original release on the 360 and PS3, because of the lack of DLC and access to it, You really can't go wrong with any version of the game. Not the Return to Arkham released on the PS4 and Xbox One, not the recent Arkham Collection on the Switch, which caught me off guard but is wholeheartedly welcome, not even Armored Edition on the Wii U, if you want to be funny. There's still plenty of work to do in Arkham City, and I think the call is worth answering.
I'm Flame Ripper, and now I'm left with these two clues that I need to find the next adventure. I mean, the grunts were asking what's next, but this one's written in weird digits, and this one I found in an alleyway saying, "It will end where it began." Wait. Began.